I saw a screenshot of an old Facebook post by Carl Smallwood recirculated the other day talking about Rollercoaster Tycoon. You've probably seen it before. In it, Carl described what he would do back in the day in that game to beat an old scenario he remembered, and well, I just love Rollercoaster Tycoon. I played it when I was a little kid, and on and off between then and now, I played it occasionally with varying degrees of obsession. And this post made me reinstall it and play it again. But the thing with the post is, you can do this in Rollercoaster Tycoon. Let's go into the comment section and see what other people say about it. Oh no. Oh no!
Me and my sister 100% did the same shit when I played the game in university.
Told you it was real.
I was looked online and found this advice. It was absolutely in one of the games. I wasn't the only one.
Okay, let's talk about this. This didn't sit right with me. Not only because the post was wrong, I know Carl wrote this as a joke for a stand-up routine, but because people were arguing in the comments about remembering definitely doing the same back in the day. Are they all lying? And if so, why? Or is this a case of false memories? Some kind of inception situation where they all had these memories implanted into their minds by a malicious actor? Our brains seem to be delicate little things, and memories that we have stored in them are not as bulletproof as it may appear at first glance. A couple of years ago, I played a bitsy game called Under a Star Called Sun by Cecil Richards. It released in 2020 and was coded for Liminal Magazine's Glitch series. There is a line about misremembering in it that stayed with me.
The memory gets corrupted with each new iteration of it. Like a wave washing over writings on sand. Over and over. Like a cassette tape played over and over. Like a JPEG saved over and over.
Honestly, play this game. It's like 10 minutes and it's free on itch and you will cry. I know I did. It does something to you. It's an emotional roller coaster. Rollercoaster Tycoon is remembered as a great game, but does it still hold up? Yes. Yes, of course it does. It's still a masterpiece. Chris Sawyer wrote the whole code for this game in just about 2 years in assembly, which looks like this. I cannot wrap my head around how one person can code an entire game this brilliant in a language that is not only not a visual one, but it isn't even readable by humans at all. Like, do you know what these numbers and letters all do? I know I can roughly understand what certain lines do when I look at code written in C#, even though I can't code it myself. But assembly? And this was used to code the whole game and keep track of every coaster train, every peep, every path tile and what's on it, every isometric line in the landscape, every single fucking duck. But this brilliant move by Sawyer is also why it runs so smooth, even on the oldest machines. Cutting the middleman and communicating with the machine directly on an almost primal level makes the game run as fast as it does. We didn't have a powerful PC back in the day in the early 2000s, but I remember this running perfectly, way better than Half-Life, Unreal Tournament or other games I would have wanted to play at the time. If you think about what is happening on and off the screen at any given time, hundreds of guests roaming around, pathfinding, roller coasters, soaring and calculating physics, it's quite an impressive achievement, to be honest. Sawyer traveled around the world to as many amusement parks as he could to study the parks, coasters and other attractions they offered and to fully understand how they operated behind the scenes. He wanted to get everything right. And you can definitely feel this dedication when you play the game. Every little detail is customizable, from adjusting the brake or chain lift speeds to setting individual prices for each item you are selling in the park. Everything is intertwined. Every shrub you place may influence how people feel about the park, how exciting a certain ride is, and how likely guests are to ride it for that. The graphics also were created by only one person, Simon Foster. They hold up as well after all these years, are truly timeless pieces of art in my opinion. Everything works together so nicely, and it is very easy to build good-looking stuff with the assets given to you with only a few clicks. And the graphics are iconic as fuck. You can show cropped screenshots of Rollercoaster Tycoon to people, and if they played the game at some point in their life, they'll recognize the style. But why are they also recognizing stuff that wasn't in the game? In 1991, during a psychology course taught by Professor Elizabeth Loftus, an expert in the study of memory and cognition, students were encouraged to design and carry out their own experiments exploring the malleability of human memory. One of our undergrads, Jim Cohen, took a particular interest in the concept of false memories, the idea that people can come to believe they remember events that never actually happened. With Loftus's guidance, Cohen devised a simple study aimed at testing whether it was possible to implant a completely fabricated memory into someone's mind. To carry out the experiment, Cohen enlisted members of his own family, his mother, sister, and brother, to serve as his test subjects. He prepared a small booklet for each of them, containing short narratives about various events from their early childhoods. These stories were true, based on actual memories shared by family members. However, one key story included in the booklets given to his brother was entirely fictitious. In this fabricated account, Cohen's brother supposedly became separated from his family in a shopping mall at around age 5. The story described him wandering alone, becoming frightened, and eventually being helped by a kind elderly stranger who returned him safely to his family. Cohen asked his family members to read through each story and then write down any memories or details that came to mind. He specifically instructed them to recall the events as vividly as possible, adding sensory details, emotions, or other remembered information. His brother, unaware that one of the stories was false, read through the fabricated mall incident just like the others. To Cohen's surprise, and to the fascination of researchers later on, his brother accepted the false memory as genuine and began to elaborate on it. Over time, he added specific elements that were never part of the original fake story. What the mall looked like, how he felt while being lost, and even vague recollections of the elderly person who had helped him. These added details were entirely invented in his mind, but he experienced them as real. At the end of the study, Cohen debriefed his family and revealed that one of the stories in the booklet had been completely fabricated by him. When asked to identify which story they believed was false, his brother was unable to pick out the made-up event and insisted that all the stories, including the one about being lost in the mall, had really happened. Even after Cohen explained that the mall incident had never occurred and was entirely made up by him, his brother found it difficult to accept the truth. He had internalized the memory so fully that it felt real to him. This initial experiment became known as the Lost in the Mall study and would go on to influence research in psychology and cognitive science. The experiment has since been replicated in various forms by other researchers, often using personal anecdotes from other relatives to add credibility to the false stories. These studies have involved participants of different ages and backgrounds, and the results have remained consistent. About 25% of people come to fully accept a fabricated memory as genuine. Many not only believe the false story, but, like Cohen's brother, add their own details while misremembering. This phenomenon has become a central piece of evidence in understanding how memory works and how it can be manipulated, whether intentionally or unintentionally. To add another example of false memory, in his video essay, What the Internet Did to Garfield, Super Eyepatch Wolf talks about how his mother reminded him of the big Garfield plush he had as a child and that he took everywhere. Even though he had no memory of it whatsoever, The plush appears in photos and video recordings from that time.
So, guess what? I found the picture of you with your Garfield.
Oh, ma'am, I don't think that was me. I was never actually that into Garfield.
How is that possible? Is our memory really so easily manipulated? Can memories just be deleted, replaced, or rewritten on a whim? The implications of these stories underscore the fragility and reconstructive nature of human memory. Rather than being a perfect recording of past events, our memories can be influenced by suggestion, social pressure, or even a simple story told with enough confidence. The findings of this research have reached beyond academic circles and into real-world contexts, including courtroom testimony, therapy practices, and our broader understanding of how people remember and interpret their personal histories. Do you remember when you played Rollercoaster Tycoon for the first time? How old were you? The era I first discovered Rollercoaster Tycoon in is a super nostalgic time period for me, as I bet it is for you. Maybe not the early 2000s specifically, but generally the time you spent being in your teens. That's just how it works. Do you remember the golden years of The Simpsons? Fans are pretty split about whether to include certain seasons of Simpsons episodes in that category, and I feel this is a case of rose-colored glasses.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
If you are in your formative years and discover these episodes, you'll probably cherish them forever. Unlike someone who didn't grow up with them and either started watching way earlier or way later than you. This would also be a time period where you still had a big future ahead of you. A future that never really existed and that now will never exist. Is this what nostalgia is about? Is it an escapism to a time you perceived as simpler, more relaxed, and generally better? The past sure wasn't simpler though, even if it seems that way to us now. We were simpler. The less you understand how the world works, the more rose-colored and blurry your glasses will be when you look back at these times. You simply couldn't put together all the complex workings, all the cynicism and all the horrors of the real world. A time where there was endless potential, where every path you choose would take you to a different kind of perfect future. But none of these futures probably manifested for you. And as much as you yearned for these futures back then, the older you get, you begin to yearn for the innocent years where the future still was a possibility. But was it ever? Do you remember when you played Rollercoaster Tycoon for the last time? When I was about 16, I was pretty active in a big RCT-related forum. I built parks, I collaborated on stuff, I tried my hand at competitions, and I was decent enough at it. At the same time, I was losing interest in doing art. I have always been an artist, scribbling and drawing on every surface I could find. That this could be a career option, I knew not. Nobody in my circle of friends or family was especially artistic, so I just never thought about drawing and making art this way. But then someone from this RCT forum reached out when they heard about me drawing stuff and asked me to join another forum. This one comic and cartoon related. And the community there felt like I found my people. Apparently you could make a living doing this stuff too? Some of the folks I met online in this forum remain my friends to this day. We met up and went to countless conventions together as guests and later as artists ourselves. We started projects, organized events, and attended each other's weddings. I know this is a weird tangent, but without Rollercoaster Tycoon, I would have never met these people. Would probably never have pursued art as a career, and my life would be fundamentally different for it. time is cyclical, at least from a nostalgia perspective. For pop culture, fashion, and the media in general, the cycle was said to be around 30 years. When Back to the Future came out in the 80s, people were nostalgic for the 50s, so that's where the movie takes us. In good media, that reference will make some statement about the time it's set in, or about the time it was made by referencing an era gone by, either by idolizing the past or by showing how we could improve on potential mistakes made decades prior. There is a renaissance for nostalgia of all kinds lately. Be it 80s, 90s or 2000s, the people that grew up in these times, or with leftover relics by other siblings, for example, will muddy the waters on what a generation will be nostalgic for. When Stranger Things hit almost 10 years ago, it was par for the course in this 30-year cycle for the 80s nostalgia. However, the more agency we get as a consumer, the more I see this rigid timeline breaking down. The 80s were popular again way before Stranger Things, and a big demographic of the people watching Stranger Things now, or other media that references these time periods, can't be nostalgic for it, because they never lived through it. Heck, even I am too young to remember the 80s, but a Generation Z born after 1996, most of them not even having memories formed before the turn of the millennium, are eating that shit up. You could consume Stranger Things and think you got a good idea of what it was like to live in the 80s. And you would be wrong, of course. Stranger Things won't tell you about the racism, the homophobia, mental health care cuts, or other cultural and social issues that riddle this time period. The 80s of Stranger Things are perfectly designed to lull you into this false nostalgia, to spark in you a desire to be part of that historical moment in time. Lucky for you, you can, by just consuming and buying the product Stranger Things will offer you in the form of clothing cooperations, Happy Meal deals, and Lego sets. If you don't know what the 80s were like, they might as well have been that. And now you're a part of it. The sentimental longing for a time period or a place one has never known is called anemoia. And people love this false nostalgia. It's one of the core reasons why populism works. Like, who wouldn't want to make America great again? But when was America great? When was it ever truly great? When white people owned slaves? When women had no right to vote or weren't allowed to have an own bank account? When people of Asian descent were rounded up and put into concentration camps? When queer people were left to die of AIDS? When children were put into cages? When its tax dollars are funding genocide? I also see this rise of fascism here in Germany, where parties want to go back to the good old times. What good old times? The 30s and 40s in Germany? Who were those times good for? They might have been great for capitalists, but they sure as hell wouldn't have been great for you, especially if you are part of any minority group. The same goes for the decades following. If you are read as anything other than a white cishet male, then good luck. But of course, people still lived their lives in these times. And it isn't to say that these people could have also had good moments. There is a line Max Gold wrote in an essay that is burned into my brain.
Auch in der Nazi-Zeit war 12-mal Spargelzeit.
Meaning, even during the Nazi era, there were 12 asparagus seasons, which is, now that I think about it, probably the most German sentence in existence. But it means people lived their lives. They celebrated, ate their favorite food, and fell in love despite the horrors. And yet, these past times shouldn't be romanticized for obvious reasons. Is this another case of time being cyclical when it comes to nostalgia? Bringing back fascism in the 20s of a given century? Could we please not? Like, I feel this is an obvious one. So, is it fascist to be nostalgic about stuff? Of course not. But it's a good thing to be aware that the same mechanisms that let you see the past through rose-colored glasses are used by bad actors to manipulate people to go back to an imagined and glorified past that never even existed.
You know, it's funny. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
There's probably a whole lot more to say about a false nostalgia being created with stuff like the Studio Ghibli filter being used to sell you right-wing propaganda. But that's probably another video, and maybe someone already did that, I don't know. Maybe I'll do more of this theme proper in the future, we'll have to see. For now, let's focus on the past. My dad grew up in West Berlin when the wall was still there. As a child, he would chase GIs when they patrolled the wall on jeeps until they threw chewing gum at the pursuing kids. This was a pretty normal childhood for him, despite everything. Under the threat of the Cold War, he grew up, met my mom and married her. And by the time I was a kid, the wall was gone, and so was the good old time. But there is no good old time, is there? Only time. To come back to the topic at hand, no, it wasn't possible to win a scenario by launching your coasters into a competing park, because there were no competing parks on the map. There was only ever your park, and you built that park alone as it was a single-player game. That's just how Rollercoaster Tycoon worked. But these people could just be misremembering. Memories are blurry, and it was quite some time ago. Misremembering the past collectively has a name. It's called the Mandela effect. It's named after the widespread belief that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, when he actually died in 2013, decades after being released. The same is true for the spelling of the Berenstain Bears book series. Or was it the Berenstain Bears? When I was the age of my dad when he was chasing GIs for chewing gum, there was a theme park in Berlin we would go to often as a family, and I must have been there even more frequently without my parents. It was a place I would get invited to for birthday parties or just hang out with my friends once I was old enough to do so on my own. From a theme park standpoint, the Spreepark was nothing special, nothing to write home about. A couple standard coaster designs, a log flume, a Ferris wheel, and a couple used carnival rides. The park started out in the eastern part of split Germany, the GDR, in 1969, and it went strong for 20 years. But when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, the park closed down as well. It was reopened in 1992 under the new name Spreepark, and at this point was already in a state of disrepair, not that I would have minded as a kid. I had the time of my life in this dodgy park. Spreepark was only open for about 8 years before it closed down in 2001, and the owner fled to Peru, taking some of the portable rides with him. I was lucky to have been both alive and at the right age to enjoy the brief time my hometown ever had a theme park. I'm sure that these days spent riding rides, eating candy apples and gummy worms, and spending quality time with the people I loved played a huge role in my obsession with Rollercoaster Tycoon and theme parks in general. Now, The park is closed down, but still has a weird grip on me. That abandoned plot of land left to rot, surrounded by the bustling city, seems almost magical. Forgotten swan boats between the reeds and giant plastic dino statues collapsed into the ground, rusty roller coaster tracks swallowed by shrubbery, and nature claiming back old carousels and twister rides. This would make a great Rollercoaster Tycoon scenario. And I'm not the only one nostalgic for this park.
In 2013, a 90-year-old woman broke into Spreepark and had to be rescued from the Ferris wheel after the wind carried her up, but not back down again. "It used to be so nice here," she said. "I simply wanted another go."
I need to confess here. I was that old woman. Or at least I might as well have been, because what's a chain link fence against nostalgia and a bolt cutter? Playing Rollercoaster Tycoon to me feels like coming home. This game will always have a place in my heart, and I'm thrilled it is in such a good place right now. Do you remember how cool it was to build this hybrid coaster in Rollercoaster Tycoon back in the day? Or this rail coaster that can do some wild inversions? Well, you can't, because these coaster types were not in the original Rollercoaster Tycoon 1, 2, or any of the add-ons for the game. Rollercoaster Tycoon is a 26-year-old game, and yet it is still being worked on. Not by Chris Sawyer or any of the original team from back in the day, but by the very community. OpenRCT2 is a free and open source project that recreates the 2002 video game Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. Using the platform-independent C++ programming language, the devs made sure to create an accurate and faithful clone of the original game. But they didn't just recreate the game from scratch, they improved on its gameplay, got rid of bugs, and added a lot of new rides and numerous features the original game lacked. And they are far from finished. The game is updated frequently, adding even more improvements with every new release. OpenRCT2 adds features you think the game would have had in the first place. If you play a couple of times with these new add-ons, your memory will blur and you will misremember them always having been there. That's just how good they are. The newly added multiplayer support lets you play your parks together with friends on a server, something I always wished for when collaborating with people from all over the world back in my RCT Prime. We used to send files back and forth via email like cavemen. There is now a fast forward mode, so if you already beat all the requirements of a scenario, you can just go whoosh to October Year 3 and reap your rewards. You can also just toggle the early victory condition switch to get the win once you've completed what the scenario asks of you. There is a whole cheat menu that lets you do basically everything you want. This sounds like it would take all the fun out of a game built around beating scenarios, but here's the thing. Beating all the scenarios was only ever half the fun of Rollercoaster Tycoon. The main reason I played the game was for building my own parks from scratch. The scenario editor lets you create a whole map of your own design to later fill with whatever park you can dream up. Money and the restrictions of normal scenario play rarely play a role in these parks, and the cheats let you turn them off entirely. But what's groundbreaking about the cheat menu in OpenRCT2 is that it lets you do stuff natively that required the use of multiple other programs back in the day. You can, for instance, toggle clearance checks now with the push of a button, letting you place scenery objects into one another, placing stuff on pathways or underwater, and making it that your trackitecture, that's architecture made out of track pieces, doesn't destroy your other scenery like it normally would. So you can create way denser foliage, more detailed buildings, and generally push your building capabilities to the next level if you're up for it. The newly added Tile Inspector adds a whole new bag of possibilities to the game. It lets you rotate entrances, copy and paste track pieces, scenery, and part of flat rides to your heart's content. This, together with the ability to merge different tracks together with the disabled clearances, makes it so you can create rides that just aren't possible to build in the base game. Smarter people than me came up with the concept of shoestringing, basically leading one car of a train to another track to control the movement of the remainder of the train. This visible train sits on a completely different track and can now act in ways the layout wouldn't normally allow for. Sounds pretty complicated, and it kinda is, but if you want to get into it, there are step-by-step tutorials on the internet to get you started. And there are countless other ways to use the tools given to you by just this one little new pop-out window, some of which might not even have been discovered yet. New track pieces for existing coasters and rides, like the bigger turns for the go-karts and various inversions like zero-G rolls and bigger corkscrews, makes you wonder why they haven't always been included. Your roller coasters can now have proper dive loops, diagonal brake runs, and different looping sizes, making it way easier to recreate designs existing in real-world parks. And the versatility will only increase as new elements are being developed still. Overbanked turns are a missing piece for some coaster designs, for example, and we already saw work-in-progress pictures of them on Reddit. The original color palette has doubled in size with OpenRCT2. Now we get a lot more in-between colors, muted variants and pastel tones as added options, as well as some deep dark versions of green, purple, blue and brown, just to name a few. There's also the option to color something with an invisible swatch, great for some gimmicky builds and trackitecture, for example. Speaking of invisible, with a little life-changing addition to a drop-down menu, you can now hide the entrances and exits, making it easier for rides to look more like they do in real life. I wish I had this option back in the day, as it makes parks look so much cleaner. And parks can be way bigger now, with both the size limit of the maps and the limit on how much scenery you can choose from and place being increased so much. It's really up to you what you want your park to be. Do you want to create the most realistic theme park out there? Or do you want a park set in the Stone Age or on an asteroid floating through space? The limit really is your imagination, so go nuts with it. And with all the new features I mentioned and so many added quality of life improvements I didn't even got into, it's more fun than it ever has been. You get an exhaustive, ever-expanding toolbox, however that works, to lay down what you can dream up. There is a vast community to explore if you're up for that. Forums like New Element and Reddit are a way to showcase off parks, new custom scenery and new plugins for the game, while YouTube and Twitch provide a space for park building streams, tutorials on how to hack certain rides to do what you want them to do, and just generally informative and fun content. And if you are the competitive type, there are contests being held and judged on various themes pretty regularly. There is even a scenario Let's Play series by a real-life theme park designer, so if that doesn't get you excited, what are we even doing here?
So in the end, we're going to do something like this. We're not going to have any helixes or anything. And on the whole, this is kind of a shorter Junior Boomerang, but feels still a respectable length and is not too bad. And it works fairly well from a pacing standpoint because it has some of the climbs kind of working its way upwards towards the reverse spikes, and then on the way back, you're not having to struggle against hills that are too high up off the ground. So you have to pay attention to that so you don't use up all your momentum at the very beginning.
And get this, just a couple of weeks ago, a person recovered a scenario file that was in the original copy of the game, but only in the version shipped out to Taiwan. So this is a previously unknown scenario from 26 years ago that almost no one knew even existed. And you can download and play it right now. I really love the internet for these things, it's amazing. Once you go full open RCT2, the original game becomes almost unplayable, making you groan because the features you take for granted now suddenly aren't there anymore. Rollercoaster Tycoon is remembered as a great game, but does it still hold up? Yes, of course it does. It's still a masterpiece. Editing Tim here. I bet you feel pretty stupid right now, past Tim. No, but that's the thing. It is still a masterpiece, even if OpenRCT2 improves on it so much and will continue to do so. And if you enjoyed RCT back in the day, you will love OpenRCT2 for all the quality of life improvements. In case you want to dive deeper, there is now a whole world to explore, creating your own park from scratch, hacking coasters and building the most beautiful park imaginable with more tools at your disposal than ever before. So go out and play this super old video game that somehow keeps on giving. You can play through the old scenarios just for nostalgia's sake, even if you already played them 100 times already. And you can still find new ways of completing them. They still hold up. Nostalgia is a word that comes in part from the Greek nostos, a Homeric word meaning homecoming, and in part algos, meaning pain, homecoming pain. Nostalgia has this way of tricking us. You'll replay moments gone by in your head, looking at photos and thinking that what once was is somehow better than what you have now. Or even worse, it's showing you a time that never existed in the first place, or is at best heavily warped. But as we discovered with Rollercoaster Tycoon, even as good as it was back in the day, we can build from it towards a better now and an even better future. Let us try to do this, not only in regards of video games, but in regards of every aspect of society and community. When I play Rollercoaster Tycoon, I feel reminded of my childhood. A carefree time, weekends spent with nothing but building virtual theme parks, meeting with friends and riding bikes around the small neighborhood I grew up in. And I know even these memories, as clear as they may seem to me now, are already distorted and will continue to meld and fade as time goes on. I set out to make a video about one of my favorite games, and as your experience, fell into kind of a rabbit hole of a different theme which transformed the video into this weird thing that you just watched. Writing this was fittingly kind of a roller coaster ride, to be honest. But I felt it was appropriate to talk about all the topics I mentioned because just as my memories of time long gone have blended into a nostalgic smoothie, this game has been transformed for the better by its community even decades after its release. And I think that's beautiful. Even though things in the world are looking bleak right now, it shows me that a better future is possible if we learn from the past instead of just idolizing it. Until next time, be excellent to each other. Thank you for watching this video until the end, and a special thanks to my patrons, whose names you can see on the screen right now. You're awesome. If you want to join the ranks of these wonderful individuals, My Patreon link is in the description. I know this video is a far stray from what I usually would put out, and I don't know if I'll continue to wander aimlessly between video topics, so you'll just have to wait and see. If you like stuff like this though, maybe stay around, leave me a follow, and you'll know whenever there's something new, whatever that something will be. This is a journey for me as well, so thanks for being a part of it.